Welcome back, world. You're listening to the PNN Radio Network. I am your host, Mike Shoesmith. You have undoubtedly heard us talk about the clear, irrefutable evidence for the connection between the epidemic of fatherlessness in the West, right, and the whole sexual confusion which exists in greater and greater measure. We've gone as far back as Rock Hudson, whose father abandoned the family during the Great Depression, and Raymond Burr had a similar story. Barry Manilow never even knew his father. Anderson Cooper's father died when he was 10 years old. Elton John's father was also never around, and the list goes on and on. Alan Cumming goes into great detail in his autobiography of his father's emotional and physical violence, which he inflicted upon his kids. And when asked in a GQ interview in 2004 about the nature versus nurture argument regarding how a person becomes homosexual, George Michael replied, quote, "In my case, it was a nurture thing via the absence of my father, who was always busy working. It meant I was exceptionally close to my mother." So what can be done about all of this? You know, we can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, but who's doing anything about it? Well, my next guest has written a book which targets these vulnerable young people titled, "I Don't Have to Choose," which helps children internalize the truth that God made them just the way they are, including being a boy or a girl, in a way that is simple, affirming, and free of stereotypes. Her name is Ellie Klipp, and she joins us by phone. Ellie, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Well, it's great to have you on here. When I first came upon your work, which is on Amazon, by the way, and has all 5 stars on it, I was intrigued by this because finally I was coming across somebody who was actually doing something about this epidemic and perhaps even pandemic sweeping the world of fatherlessness and how that's affecting these young kids. And you've taken it upon yourself to educate them about all of this. And I'm going to get into more about why I'm excited about this, but tell the people who you are and why you felt that this needed to be done.
Well, basically, I'm a grandma. I used to be a school teacher. I've taught everything from kindergarten through 8th grade, except 1st grade. I loved those kids, and I learned a lot from all the kids. I had my own kids and some grandkids, and I have a very happy, full, busy life. I just finished a master's degree, which was a whole lot of work.
Wow.
And and we have a little ranch we're trying to develop. So I had plenty of things going on in my life. But I was reading the newspaper one day, and as I tend to do, I spouted to my husband about across the kitchen table about, oh, this and oh, that. And what really got me upset was when I was reading about in our area, the little 7 and 8-year-old girls who were upset because there was a boy who felt like a girl who wanted to be in their bathroom at school. And I said, this is wrong. It's wrong from my opinion, it's wrong for the little boy who's being told that he's really a girl inside. And it's definitely wrong for the little girls who are frightened, offended, concerned about having a little boy in their bathroom. And I said, this is wrong. They're starting, this happened to be in the 2nd and 3rd grade, but they're starting to push this idea throughout our area in even preschool and kindergarten. And I said, I was sitting there and I said to my husband, somebody ought to do something. This is terrible. Somebody ought to do something for the little kids. Why doesn't And I felt like God said, excuse me, aren't you somebody?
Right.
So I thought, okay, I'll write a book for little kids. Now, how do you talk about gender and gender identity? And by the way, just as an aside, I think gender identity is a false construct. It begs the question. It's a philosophical construct that assumes that there is an identity of gender different from your biological gender.
All right.
And we can talk more about that later. But at any rate, I said, somebody ought to do something for these kids, but how do you write a book about this for young kids?
Right.
Oh, so I did. I wrote a book, and I read it, and I said, ugh, that is dull. What kid would want to read that?
Uh-huh.
So I thought about my grandkids, and I thought about what they like to read, and I thought about how the little ones memorize the books and then read them, quote unquote, saying back what they've memorized, and how it's going into their understanding of what the world is and what the world is like. And these are mostly little rhyming picture books. So I said, okay, I'll try again. What do little kids like? Dogs and cats and pictures and trucks and playing. And so that's what I did. I wrote a little book, and I decided to approach it from the angle of what is it that is confusing people out there. One of the main things that is confusing them is the idea that how you dress and what you like to do, your activities, define whether or not you are male or female. So if a little boy likes to play with nice material and picks up a doll, someone will say to him, oh, maybe you're really a girl.
Okay.
That's a silly idea. A little boy is going to grow up and be a dad. Sure, he might want to pick up a doll. And who are the best designers in this country, dress designers? They're men. So, this idea that if you like nice materials or if you like to play with a doll, you're really female, is totally absurd.
Right.
And then what about the little girl who likes to play in the dirt with a muscle truck and go zoom, and she likes baseball, and she doesn't want to play with dolls?
Right.
That's fine. She's a little girl who likes muscle trucks in the dirt and likes baseball.
Right.
She's still a girl. So that's the way I tried to approach it in this book, and I showed the little boy, Alex, for Alexander, and the little girl, Alexis, Alex, both of them playing in all different situations together, showing that it's not your activity that defines you. It's not what you like to do or that sort of thing that defines you as a boy or a girl. And then we get to the page, a double spread page, where it shows a mom on the cable having an ultrasound, and the dad is standing there, and the doctor, and it says, long before I was born, it showed on the screen, because God put XY in my genes. That's the boy's page. And the girl's page is because God put XX in my genes.
Right.
Now, actually, there's a note at the end of the book that says, okay, it's not in your genes, it's in your chromosomes. But chromosome is a pretty big word for kids. Plus, we all say it's in our genes for whatever trait we have inherited. So, and there is a page at the end that says, for the kids, it says, each one of us has over 30 trillion cells in our body. And each single one of those cells has either an XY or an XX. So for a boy, over 30 trillion times in his body, in his eyelash, and his ear, and his elbow, and his nose and his toes, it says boy. Boy. And for a girl, over 30 trillion times in her body, there's an XX. And in her hair, and her knee, and her back, and her toe, and her nose, it says girl. It's not just a matter of certain things that we look at and say, oh, this is a boy when he's born, or this is a girl when she's born. No, it's in every single cell of our bodies. And this idea, I was reading an article recently, actually by Michael Cook in Australia, who has something called MercatoNet. And he said that he was quoting a Margaret McCarthy, who wrote that this idea of dualism goes back to French philosopher René Descartes, who said that man is just a machine is a master, and the body is just sort of an accessory which gets in the way of our freedom to be who we really are. This kind of idea is completely contrary to the idea of the Bible, that God created us as a man or a woman, body and soul as one unit. I'm not a floating soul in the world.
Right.
My body and my soul, I am a unit that God created. And he created us male or female, Genesis 1:27. So I tried not to make this book too preachy.
Right.
But I had to bring in God.
Sure.
And I had to bring in the science.
Absolutely.
But it had to be something the kids would enjoy, so the pictures and the rhymes.
Well, and much of what you just said could be confusing for many adults, right? But you're speaking to an adult audience right now, so I appreciate you lifting it up to our level of understanding. But here's an Amazon review from the Amazon.com customer reviews page for your book. It says Ellie Clip has taken the self-esteem and self-identity messages of the 60s and 70s and steered them back into normative reality. Without malice, this book empowers parents of young children to confidently promote the truths that are self-evident and even learn some long-forgotten science facts. Forget about social wars. This is just a fun book to read to your kids. And you know what? Honestly, this is what really excites me because of these issues that we're having in society of fatherlessness or fathers being gone from home because of their jobs. You can think of long distance truck drivers and people like that, and they're not home much to have an influence on their sons, particularly as much as the mothers are. And the research that we've done points to this lack of father's input into a boy's life leads him to, when he hits puberty, when he starts looking for sexual expression, it manifests in a homosexual way because he's missing the love of his father. So I've always said to these men, you've got to explain this to your sons, that even though I'm not home much, you are a man, you are a boy, genetically, in every possible way. Just get alone by yourself, get a full-length mirror from Walmart, strip down, and look at yourself. You are what the plumbing says you are, and you bring this into a way. This is a valuable tool that these mothers and fathers can use with their sons and daughters to show them and keep it ever in their minds that this is what you are. You have God's stamp on you of what you are. Do not allow society, in the most liberal sense, to confuse these issues for you, right?
Right. It's interesting because, and this is not part of my book, but I was reading a book recently on forensic medicine, and one of the tests that they gave to the students was to give them a skull and ask if it was male or female. Well, this happened to be a smaller man in stature that this skull came from. And so many of the students made the mistake and said, oh, this is a woman. And the professor said, ha, 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 you missed the little knob on the back of the skull that men have that women don't.
Uh-huh.
And so even something like that, usually they would know when they look at a skeleton from the length of the bones, the heaviness of bones. Of course, from the pelvis, they get clues. But it turns out that even on the knee, there are clues as to whether a skeleton came from a male or a female. Another test where the professor only gave the students the bone where it came up to the knee, and they all missed it.
Right.
But it happened to be because they said, we can't tell. There's not enough here. We need other things like the pelvis. And he said, yes, you can. Because the knee on a male is more open than on a female. I don't understand it exactly. And one of his students got it right away, and he said, "How did you know that?" She said, "I used to work for a knee surgeon. He always preferred to work on men. It was much easier. There was more room in there."
Right.
So, a little thing like that, forensic science is telling us, a study of skeletons, that this is a male and this is a female. There's no skin there. There's nothing attached where you could say, "I see that you are a male," or "I see that you are a female." And so these things, and as far as fathers being absent, I think one of the problems is that from the beginning we tell little boys, "No, you can't play with dolls. No, you don't cuddle the softies. You're tough." Men grow up to be fathers, and yes, they are going out and earning livings and being away from the family sometimes, but they're still tender. They're still fathers. And that impulse of a youngster to be tender toward a younger sibling or toward an animal should be encouraged, because it's a fatherly trait.
Right, and that's a great point. I interviewed Kevin Swinton. He's an author of a book. He was a homosexual man who he came out of that by the grace of God, and God showed him, that these issues that he essentially he didn't have to choose, that God had chosen for him, and he's a very interesting fellow. We developed a great friendship together, and but he's written books about this, and he essentially said the same thing. That he was a very sensitive young man. He had other brothers who were rough and tough, and that was their nature. But his father never took the time to learn about Kevin as an individual, and that he was very sensitive. He required a different kind of understanding from his father, and his father just was completely clueless about this. And so, because he never received that love from his father, when he got into puberty and he started to have, discover himself sexually, this lack of love that he didn't get from his father on an intimate level manifested sexually with other men. So the Lord delivered him out of that, and now he's in a healthy heterosexual lifestyle now. But don't you agree that the Lord can deliver these men out of this, even though they've lived they grew up in an environment where the fathers were not sensitive to the individual needs, the sensitivities of the sons?
Yes, absolutely, and that's very sad, and there can be emotional scars, but it's not a biological condition.
Right. No, exactly. Well, that's exactly right, and that's been our point for many years. What do you say to these people, though, who say, "Okay, I agree with you that I am biologically a man or a woman, but I self-identify as female, even though I have all of the male plumbing and the male genetics, and all of my genetic programming says I am a man, but I identify as a female in the gender sense." What do you say to those people?
Well, I probably wouldn't say too much to them, because they probably would not want to listen to anything that I say. But I can tell that as far as the experts go, and I am not an expert, I am quoting the Bible and quoting science.
Right.
And I'm quoting common sense. And common sense is not often brought into this. But the experts, Dr. Lawrence Mayer, who is a physician, medical epidemiologist, and biostatistician at the Department of Psychiatry, Johns Hopkins University Hospital.
Right.
And Dr. Paul McHugh,
right.
who, by the editor of the New Atlantis, was called maybe the most important American psychiatrist of the last half century. And he's also at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. And they, for 25 years, were the main psychiatrists there. And in fact, they started doing sex reassignment surgery at Johns Hopkins. And after a study, they revealed that it did not produce benefits, and that this was just just harming patients and giving them more mental depression and so on. They stopped doing it.
Right.
But these experts say that there is the hypothesis, and I'm quoting now, the hypothesis that gender identity is an innate fixed property independent of biological sex is not supported by scientific evidence. There is no evidence that a man is trapped in a woman's body or vice versa. There is no scientific evidence for that. And it's more our cultural, expectations that confuse people and hurt people. One thing that they talked about, for example, was earrings. Earrings are considered to be a marker in the past, in the distant past. They were a marker, mid-19th century, of female attire.
Right.
And so they were associated with the female. And so in social studies, they were associated with the X chromosome. However, this had nothing really to do with biology. You see how the culture has changed.
Right.
And now there are many men who wear earrings. I don't particularly like body piercings of any sort, but it's a cultural thing. And so many boys and men have an earring or two or whatever, and that is now no longer specifically associated with the X chromosome.
Right.
But this had nothing to do with biology. Now that's the kind of confusion that we get into in our culture by saying, oh, you look like a boy or you act like a boy. No, you come out either a boy or a girl.
Right.
And there are varieties of personality and interest within both of the sexes. It's okay to have our varieties of personality. God made each of us as a unique individual.
Right.
And we need to celebrate our interests, our individual personality within our God-given gender.
Right, and I couldn't agree more. You know, I have sort of a rough side to me. I'm sort of a, you know, I'm a big guy. I like to work out. I like, sports. I'm into all of that stuff. But, my son is, he's 18 years old and he's an artist and he likes museums. And, I'm kind of like Martin Crane, and my son is kind of like Niles Crane, a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Frasier, but, but you know what? Niles Crane, even though he fought this idea of being effeminate. I'm speaking of his character. In fact, in real life, he is a homosexual, but maybe it's a poor example. But in the show, he fought this effeminate nature that was always creeping up on him. He was always fighting that, but he liked women, and so even though he was into the museums and the art and the wine and the and highly educated and all of that, he couldn't fix a toilet, and but he could fix minds, and he was a brilliant psychiatrist, and he helped people, and so it's up to us fathers to acknowledge the differences in our boys. If you have 4, 5, 6 sons, you have to get to know. Even the Bible says to get to know the bents of your children. Get to know which way that wind is blowing, and encourage them to be the best they can be in that field that God created them to thrive in, but always be reminding them of the biological realities that exist within their body. And that, if you buy a brand new Mercedes and you drive it up against a wall, don't be surprised if that Mercedes is going to break down on you. And you spoke of the science earlier, Ellie. All we have to do is go to the Center for Disease Control website to learn what these men, the website page at the CDC is their MSM page, which basically stands for men having sex with men. We look at the statistics there, And we should be weeping for these men. We shouldn't be encouraging this lifestyle. We should be continuously reaching out to them, saying, you do not have to live like this. God did not make you this way. And do you thought, Ellie, do you believe, as I believe, that society has basically given up on these men? Because there used to be a time, like say, I live in Canada, right? And in Canada, the official position used to be that the alimentary system and the reproductive system are two separate systems and should never be intermingled. Now they've taken that bit of paperwork and thrown it in the garbage. Now Canada just accepts anything anybody wants to do with their bodies. But do you not think that society has basically given up on these men and said, okay, we're done reaching out to you, just do whatever you want?
Well, I do. I think that there's so much pressure these days to be politically correct and to not be seen as intolerant. And the very sad thing is that people of goodwill who want to be tolerant, who want to be loving, people who want to be kind are being deceived so that they are supporting somebody or encouraging somebody in a direction that causes them tremendous emotional anguish and mental depression. And this is not from me. This is from Meyer and McHugh. I try not to say pronouncements on the basis of my knowledge because
Right.
I'm not a psychiatrist, but McHugh and Meyer were saying in their article the great incidence of mental depression and mental illness that results from a confusion of gender issues in general. And it's very sad. So for all of these people, and particularly for children who are not, into any sexual expression, but who are learning about what it means to be an individual. And from the very beginning, little kids will say, you're a boy or you're a girl. They know.
Right.
It's very easy to tell. And now, something they have figured out, something they have buttoned down very early, is being confused for them. And it's sowing up confusion and uncertainty and distrust. Why should we put such a burden on little children when, as these people grow, if they are into a transgender or identity crisis where their biology and their perception of who they are is at war, this causes them great anguish and sadness. And why would we encourage somebody to try to do something that's going to hurt them so badly? So that's where our society is definitely falling down in its attempt to be kind and tolerant. It is doing exactly the opposite, and it's very sad. It's mainly, of course, because of turning away from God.
Right.
If we stayed with the biblical standpoint from the start, we wouldn't get into these issues.
It's such a powerful point you just made, that all this is happening because we are turning away from God. Because isn't that exactly what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said when he fled communist Russia? In his amazing, he was a Christian philosopher. You probably know that, but he did say that about what was going on in Russia. Even he said all of this has befallen us because men have forgotten God. And
he said that. Wow.
Yes, and he immigrated to the United States. He fled the communists, and he came to the United States. I'm not sure. I'd have to look up the year, but it was early. It was in the 60s or 70s when America still had America's moral moorings had yet to be hacked off the dock. Now it seems like America, with the socialists running amok, and Karl Marx famously said that socialism and communism are interchangeable. There's no difference. The communists are taking over the United States of America now. Perhaps Donald Trump has given us some breathing room here, but it almost seems inevitable that they will have their way. And so Americans have forgotten God. Society, the West, has forgotten God. And look at what we see happening today. But I'm so grateful to you because you are standing as as Daniel said, the people that know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And this is a powerful exploit because you're hitting them early on. You're giving parents a tool that they can use with their children. I pray that this becomes a bestseller. I don't have to choose. Helps children internalize the truth that God made them just the way they are, including being a boy or a girl, in a way that is simple, affirming, and free of stereotypes. Ellie Clip, thank you so much for coming on. People can get your book here at Amazon.com. Just look for I Don't Have to Choose, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
Close it out for us here, Ellie. Can you give us a closing statement here? And maybe as things progress here, we'll definitely have you on. You're a great guest.
Well, thank you very much. And you wanted a closing statement?
Yes, let's hear something. Give us a. We've given a lot of. I don't know. It's maybe people are bummed out listening to this. Give us a positive thing to close out the show here.
Well, I will. I think back to Abraham and his nephew Lot in Sodom, and he's saying, "But God, if there are only 10 who follow you, if there are only 5 who follow you," and of course, Sodom didn't have that many, but the United States does.
Right.
Canada does. There are many, many people who are following God and who are praying for a revival. And that's what we need. We need a revival. We need people turning back to the Lord. There's a lot of prayer going up, and God is a merciful God. So we'll see.
We will indeed. We will indeed. Ellie Clip, author of I Don't Have to Choose. Get this book today. Do it for your family. Do it for your children. Do it for yourself. My name is Mike Shoesmith. You've been listening to the PNN Radio Network. We'll talk to you next time.